All righty. How is everybody doing today? Thank you so much for joining. Another live episode of This Week in Drones coming at you every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're here to create meaningful conversation and progress the drone industry in general, integrating drones into the national airspace, but also the sort of counter drone side of what about the drones that are not supposed to be there, and how do we deal with that, and how do we navigate and understand everything that's in the airspace. And something that is right on topic today about public safety drones that we were just chatting about backstage is, what happens when there's all sorts of drones in the air, hundreds, thousands, maybe. This one's delivering an Amazon package, and that one's responding to a 911 call, and how do we understand who's who and how they work together and give appropriate right of way to each other, etc. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. And the broad topic is going to be about solving through some of the complexities of scaling a public safety drone program. And of course, policy that I just alluded to is a major one. We're going to also touch on a couple other more kind of technology focused and public relation focused complexities. How do we fly drones safely in more complex airspace near GA airports and hospitals with helipads and make sure we're deconflicting? How do we fly at these stadiums where there's so much frequency activity and things going on, it's hard to keep connectivity to the drones? So we'll kind of hash through some of these one at a time, and we are live right now. So if you're out there, throw us a comment, say hi. Would love to acknowledge you as I see you pop up there. And then if you have questions for this panel as we're going through, we've got some amazing people here with insights across the board around public safety and drones. If you have thoughts, questions for the panel, please type them in right now, send them over. I'll see those come through and we'll pull those up as well, and we'll chat through them. So with that said, I will do some more deep dive introductions, but of course we have Michelle Duquette with 3 Mad Air. And I'm going to ask her to say a few words here in a minute, but she's an incredible consultant in the industry, helping large, whole groups of people, all these different stakeholders in cities to work together and create these drone ecosystems, which has really been fun to see and be part of. And of course, Robb Monkman with TEAL Communications. Thanks so much for joining us again today, Robb. And Robb's going to bring some insights around that connectivity challenge of all the frequencies and all the things going on in these dense environments, and how TEAL and some of the technologies are solving through that. I'll let you kind of dive into that in a little bit here. And then Charles Werner, of course, DRONERESPONDERS, just an incredible industry advocate amongst many other roles that he plays. And he's going to bring some insights, some thoughts as he kind of spearheads the message that the law enforcement, public safety, basically is accumulating the thoughts and the comments to go forward from public safety as the FAA is finalizing some policies and some rules right now that we're all talking about at length. But he's the guy. I want him to share a little bit about that here in a minute, and also reach out to him. Come see most of us in person next week in Vegas. We'll be at the Commercial UAV conference at the Drone Responders event there that I'll let Charles speak to here in a minute. But he's the guy. If you have thoughts, if you have questions that you want to actually roll up to legislators before these rules are finalized, talk to Charles, please. And then, of course, Don Redman with Brink Drones, delivering the physical drone itself to law enforcement agencies that they're using to dispatch out for responding to 911 calls. And so I wanted to have just kind of a plethora of perspectives and angles here that we can kind of pass through and solve through. And then, hey, Andrew Bowen, thanks for shouting out as well. And anyone out there, feel free to kind of message in as we're live. So with that, I think kind of in that order, Michelle, could you just maybe do a brief introduction? But I'd like you to give us some of that context that you just shared with us backstage, so people can be thinking with the right lens as we kind of move through this. And then I'll pass it to Robb here in a second after that.
Sure. So hi everybody, thanks for joining us again. Today I'm in a little bit different mindset than I have been in the last several episodes, and it's because of a thought leadership summit that Charles and I attended earlier this week from UVA. It was very enlightening, and I walked away with a much firmer belief that we've been going about this the wrong way. We have been trying to assume public safety into regulatory structures that we're still creating for, like, the defense folks and national security or commercial operations. And the fact is starting to become much clearer to me that it's a square peg round hole situation, and that public safety has enough nuances to its tactical and dynamic environment, that we really need to start respecting those nuances and looking at them as an independent voice that also needs its own independent policy. So I am going to be looking at this from that lens. Now, you all know that I am still the biggest advocate for interoperability. So what I'm not suggesting is yet another stovepipe. I am suggesting that there are opportunities for a different way to look at allowances and authorizations and approvals for this community that also are conducive to seamless communications with both the commercial industry and national security and defense. So that's going to be the lens that I'm going to have today.
Love it. Appreciate that, Michelle. And thanks, let's see, Carlos Martinez and David Walters, and those of you who are messaging in, any questions you have on the topics that we're addressing today, navigating complexities of flying public safety drones in the airspace, send them in. Appreciate it. Robb Monkman, I'd love for you to share, say hi, share who you are. Thank you so much for making this episode possible. I wanted to highlight before Vegas, because you're going to be there as well. And I wanted people to be able to at least get a sense of, the challenge of the communication side of the house, of like keeping comms, with your drone, with your other devices out in the field when there's a noisy frequency environment, and also just that they recognize your face when you're out there in Vegas next week, so folks can come up and say hi, and we can keep these meaningful conversations going. But feel free to just share a little bit there. And I do have a slide or two I could pull up, because you're doing some pretty cool event with Don Zoldai and some folks. So when you reference that, I can pull that up too.
Well, thank you in advance for that plug, and thanks for the opportunity to join the show today. Yep. So Robb Monkman, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at TEAL, not to be confused with TEAL drones, which happens quite frequently. At TEAL, we're actually on the connectivity side of things. And so that's what I can talk about today, the small piece of the puzzle that we're helping to solve here at TEAL. We really are in the business of helping companies like Brink and others who need to deploy their assets quickly, securely, and connect onto networks reliably. So for us, some of the things that we can talk about today as it relates to DFR and towards first responders, especially in urban and suburban environments, really is around connectivity. I mean, connectivity can be one of these big hurdles to completing the mission. And a lot of drone companies that we talk to are relying on RF today, and RF is great. And the reality, though, is that if you run into an RF wall in a big city, your mission's done. So if you think about like a big city like Seattle or New York, and there's tall buildings, there's other obstacles, and RF can be blocked, it can be jammed. You really need to make sure that your drone operations can continue, especially if it's mission critical, which is what we're talking about today. And so, we're obviously on the cellular network orchestration side of things, but for us, we're not trying to replace RF. And in some areas, we're not trying to replace satellite. For us, it's an and, it's not an or. And at the end of the day, it's about failover and redundancy. Drones as first responders they're collecting a lot of data, particularly video for surveillance. They're trying to provide that situational awareness to first responders that need to be able to make decisions and act. And if that gets interrupted and the operator doesn't receive that video feed, there's a risk that you could send too many resources to an area. There's a risk that you could send first responders into risky environments. And so, we're another lane, so to speak, beyond RF, beyond satellite, for cellular, which is really tailored well for city, urban, suburban
Good, Rob.
environment.
Yeah, and I remember talking to the guys in NYPD and the issues at Times Square. They were like talking about, the fiber connected drones that they're using in Ukraine, and asking questions about like, can we get a hold of one of those? Because that would work. But then it's like, what are the logistics of, you can't apparently recoil those when you want to fly back. You're going to just drop it on the crowd and stuff. It was a pretty funny conversation I remember having recently. But with that said, can you just share? I just want to pull this up so people can, come out to the commercial UAV next week and actually join. I think I have a slide here. Right there. Tell us about this really quick, and then I'd like Don. Don was nodding on a couple of your comments, and so I'll have him go next after this and just kind of share what they're doing, and maybe if you have any, kind of insights into what Rob was sharing. And then after that, Charles, I'd love for you to do a, kind of share about what you guys are doing, and then actually help us kick off the, that first piece of the conversation we were having backstage. But with that, Rob, can you just speak to this really quick?
Yeah, so just really quickly before we jump into the conversation, and thanks for plugging this again, 5th annual Flash Mob event. It's happening September 1st at 7 p.m. It's going to be right in between Harrah's and the Link. So definitely come and check this event out. It's going to be a fun event. We're thrilled to be co-hosting this with Carasoft and also Don Zodi and the folks over at Autonomy Global. At 8 p.m., there's going to be a band called Spandex Nation that's going to be kicking things off. So this is just a fun way to kick off the Commercial UAV Expo next week. Have some fun. Drinks are on us. They're on the house. And make sure that we start the week right.
I love it.
For you who have never experienced Spandex Nation, I highly, highly, highly recommend you go over just for that, if nothing else. This is a hairband that was so entertaining. And those of us of an age, we knew all the words. So it's fantastic.
Oh, man, it's going to be a good time. Love it. And then I'll just throw a little Easter egg in here. You might see some of these floating around the conference. And come talk to me if you want to hear a little bit about what's going on with This Week in Drones and some swag. With that said, Don, I'd love for you to just share who you are, what you guys do, and then just based on some of the comments already made, if maybe there's some moments you were kind of nodding. I'm curious to hear from you as an actual, I don't know if you call yourself an operator, but I'm kind of thinking of you at least wearing that hat in my head of someone who understands what happens when you're actually launching the drone and flying it out into these real world environments. If you have just some thoughts and context, and then we'll pass it to Charles.
Yeah, so Don Redmond, VP of DFR at Brink Drones. I'm a retired police captain from Chula Vista Police Department. I ran the first DFR program, managed it. We started with one launch location and then ultimately grew it out to 4 launch locations. So I'm with Brink that we build public safety specific drones for DFR and interior flights. So a lot of the challenges that we're seeing across the country is, with the new shielded operations that Drone Responders and Charles was really, the national working group, which was really a huge push to get that through. Agencies don't have money to budgets to stand up infrastructure for, ground-based radar and optics or whatever it is. So, ultimately, and I've said this all along, is cities that want to do drone deliveries and all of these other things, it should be one ecosystem that public safety can tap into to show how that's doing. We all hoped Part 108 was going to be that magic solution to all of these things, and Charles immediately scratched his head. So I knew that was he got awkward sitting there. So I think ultimately, kind of. Right now, we have a huge win for public safety with the shielded operations up to 200 feet, with a ASTM parachute and anti-collision lights and ADS-BN. So I think that's a lot of value. But where we go from here for longer ranges, that connectivity issues for those rural agencies that want to do drone as a first responder, but there's no infrastructure for that is the huge question for the panel.
That's great.
And my apologies if you hear background. I'm in the airport. So,
well, thank you so much for calling in as well, making that happen. Appreciate it. And to your point, that's a lot of the work Michelle has been doing, and I've been involved in some of these projects as well, where it's many stakeholders at a city that include law enforcement, and it's pretty cool to see how some of that's coming together, right? Where a lot of folks can benefit from, as you mentioned, like ground-based radar. Well, let's put it at this strategic, GA airport or something. And, they want economic development expansion, but then it gives coverage over certain neighborhoods that the law enforcement agency next door wants to actually leverage their drones for first responder. We're starting to see those actually start to come together. All right, with that, Charles, I'll let you do an introduction and then, share about what's going on next week. Because I mean, that's part of the goal of today's episode is to say, stir conversation and say, come meet us in person. Let's keep the conversation going. Next week in Vegas at Commercial UAV and at the Drone Responders co-located event there. And then if you don't mind, just kind of picking up where we left off on our conversation backstage, because we're going to talk about navigating complexities of this topic of drones for first responder. And the first major one is on the policy side. And it sounded like you had some really good thoughts about how, or even like kind of questions and good thoughtful ideas about like what we should talk about how to move that forward. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Charles.
Yes, I'm Charles Werner. I'm the director of Drone Responders, and excited to be here. We are now 50 members from reaching the 12,000 mark of members. So it's kind of an exciting time. We are the largest and leading nonprofit program in the world at this point to move advanced technology forward, both on enabling and countering. The co-located event at the Commercial UAV Expo is going to be exciting. Again, we do these co-located events because it gives us an opportunity to go in places that are closer to where people are. So we have a variety of those. In addition to our state conferences that are starting to pop up, we now have 4 state chapters. So Commercial UAV is that chance we get a chance to blend people coming to talk about public safety issues to be able to share the issues of enabling, countering, and the regulatory side of things, in addition to being able to get public safety to see some of the technology that's now available to take advantage of. So I think that it's going to be a great opportunity. It is a lesser expense to do the co-located event with drone responders than it is for the full Commercial UAV Expo, just because of the limited budgets by public safety. Having said that, as we move into this whole regulatory space, and the big elephant in the room now is Part 108. And I think I made a statement in one of the last webinars that Part 108 was a train wreck. And I want to qualify that a little bit. It was a train wreck in respect to the public safety and how that was done. And I think what happened was some things were written probably 2 years ago, and we've sat back and waited for this to come out, and it really didn't evolve with the things that have happened so quickly here recently. But I think going forward, the opportunity is there under the comments section, and this is what's really important to capture, is that that we collectively bring our voices to be heard, so that to what Michelle said is a lot of stuff we don't fit into that typical mold. So now let's specify how we don't fit into that mold and what we need to do to move there, and have the conversation with the private industry, with the delivery companies, and those to say, how can we get to a place that we're both getting what we need? Because I know in the sense that the large delivery companies that are going to be benefiting from this don't want to interfere with public safety operations. That's not their intent. So the question is, how do we do it? So under Part 108, there is a civil interest section. And I think what they originally intended, at least this is what I'm told, is that was going to be the Part 91 alternative. That was going to be how Part 91 was going to fit into Part 108. I don't see that the way it's written now that it fits that way. So how do we do that? And my idea is that we take what we've learned and what we've done from both Part 91 and Part 107 and mash that into the civil interest section so that we don't lose anything that we've gained. Because if you look at Part 108, and this is just an observation, is it's designed largely for delivery companies that are working for profit with large fleets. And there's some assumptions that this will be fully automated, that it will not have a pilot in the mix, and there's no prioritization for public safety in those discussions. I look back, this is kind of similar, a couple of people give me this analogy that, sorry, my phone's ringing. The
law enforcement agency next door.
The analogy of cars, when we had automobiles, is that cars first started driving up and down the roads, and we didn't have law enforcement vehicles and those kind of things. And suddenly those things got introduced, and we had to develop the prioritization. So we need to learn from what we know now. And somebody's asked me, what do you want in the way of prioritization? And I'm basically saying similar to what we have on the ground. When you see us coming and you know it's us, we need you to move out of our way. Now on the ground, you've got a left or right alternative. When you're in the air, you've got left, right, up and down, or land. So there's different options of how we can do that. I think we can get there. The other part is there's an issue with the whole prioritization, and that might be getting through these automated data service providers that are referenced in Part 108. And how do we get there? Can we work with the for-profit companies to maybe offset the cost for public safety to be on these data service providers, because that creates that network version that was kind of talked about when we started doing remote ID. It was an alternative of, do we do just the direct or do we do the network? And this, I think, fills in that gap of how do we all connect, and then we're able to do that detect and avoid without having some kind of specific technical solution. So I think there's a path forward, and drone responders will be providing comments out through our blog, so that if you're interested in helping to amplify that voice, that'll be out there for you so that we can have a commonality. If you have specific concerns that you want to send to me, send it to charles@droneresponders.org. I'll pull it in the mix so that we can put those comments together. And we will be sharing that with other organizations as well, so that we can make sure that our message is loud and clear and unified.
That's brilliant. So yeah, do send a note, Charles, and then again, come meet in person in Vegas and let's pick up that conversation. I thought that was really, really well spoken, Charles. Very thoughtful, and I agree that those are good paths forward, right? To where we're going to like create synergy and hopefully expand that civil interest section, right? And go from there. I'm going to kind of work backwards and go to Don. I know that your flight's going to take off here in not too long, and I don't want you to miss that. So I just wanted to see if you have any comments off of what Charles just said, from the actual, again, like the drone actually taking off, flying. He mentioned, the assumption of things being fully automated. Do you have any comments on that? Do you have any comments on, anything? Anyway, I have some other questions, but I'll just let you jump in.
Yeah, no, it's good. Charles is spot on a lot of this. The right-of-way perspective, that's something I've been thinking about quite a bit. And I actually, looking at the low-hanging fruit, when we drive police vehicles, emergency vehicles on the roadway, we activate our lights and sirens and vehicles move out of the way, right? And it should be the same for public safety. And I, if I'm going to just go with the low-hanging fruit, why not allow those 10,000 police agencies that are doing DFR ultimately, long-term, just have ADSB. So if it's transmitting ADSB or similar, we know remote ID is at the early stages and it's not quite there yet, but there should be some designation to allow public safety the right of way in the air. Because I think, to Charles' point, where the Part 108 is written is that point-to-point aspect of a delivery. Where with public safety, it's dynamic. It is not a fixed point. It may be a fixed point when they arrive, but it could be a vehicle pursuit. It could be a foot chase. It could be the wrong address. And so being able to carve out an airspace that public safety can utilize, because, cars move very fast and drones will be following them, to be able to avoid other manned aircraft is really important for safety for everybody.
That's good. Michelle, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I saw Michelle move on that. So go ahead, Michelle.
So I want to call out the difference between right of way and prioritization. So right of way in aviation is kind of like on the road where you pass on the left, right? This is how we merge. It's structural. It's different. When you have Air Force One in the airspace, we're not giving them right of way. We're giving them priority operations. They still have to comply with all right of way should someone else come towards them.
The right of way, I'm just using that analogy from public safety driving cars.
What you're saying, Don, is what I'm hearing from so many people, because they're picking up on that in the language of the NPRM, and there's a misunderstanding of the intent of that language. That language is very specific to 91-113. It's aviation regulation we already know, and it's part of our structure. It's not the prioritization that we're really talking about. That still needs to be shaped, and that would be part of the commenting. Is any aircraft in the air must follow right-of-way rules, whatever those rules are, and there needs to be more consideration, more thoughtful discussion around public safety prioritization. We already have aviation prioritization, and it works very well. We should be talking about this additional layer.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that.
Quick question, and then we're going to kind of shift topics slightly. But Andrew Bowen, thanks for throwing this note in here. There's a bunch of comments and things flying around, but I wanted to grab this real time. ADSB for drones. It sounded like maybe you alluded to that, Don, when you were talking, but do you want to clarify that a bit?
Yeah, and I know that's a hot topic. I know right now drones are not allowed to do ADSB out, and I'm not proposing drones have ADSB out. But with that being said, is there a path forward for public safety that are utilizing drone as a first responder to do, maybe it's not ADSB out, maybe there is the next iteration of remote ID that gives that notification to other, and I'm not necessarily saying manned aircraft, but other drone providers, that there is an emergency situation that is happening in their area to either avoid that current location or to be aware that there is public safety in that area, work in a situation that we know can go dynamic. So
this is
the ADSB. I know that's a big flag for a lot of people, but I know the FAA, they feel the ADSB, on 1 million drones would crash the system. I get that, but when we're just talking about drone as a first responder operations, I think that's pretty limited. And whether it's ADSB, that's just the low hanging fruit that's existing right now.
Yeah, let me clarify. And that was what I was thinking, why I think the automated data service providers may be that answer, Don, is that if we have that connectivity into that network, that it identifies us as such, and then the system will help to coordinate that deconfliction and give the right of way that you're talking about.
That's cool. Also, this was pretty interesting. Todd May, for whatever reason, your name's not popping up here, Todd, but I'll shout out. Thanks for this comment. This is interesting. He says, in addition to alerting other aircraft, perhaps drone or public safety drone ops need to be able to alert cell phones of nearby drone ops. I wonder if he means almost like Amber Alert or something. That's what pops in my head. Public freaks out with drones and consumes calls, and so it'd be nice if people had a heads up. That was kind of interesting. Maybe I don't know if that's furthers where we're going, but I thought that was creative.
We'll just quick comment on that. I was asked when I was at Chula Vista multiple times from the community, how do we know that drone that's flying in the air is a public safety drone? How do we know that that's not, that they're surveilling us or anything? So for our drones, we just put red and blue lights on there. If you want to get people's attention, turn the red and blue lights on. It still has the anti-collision lights on. I know the FAA is still struggling with the red and blue aspect of it, but it's something that's really quick. And we have a little siren that you could turn on to get people's attention also, that it's aware. So it helps with the community aspect of it, that public safety is being transparent. We're not surveilling, but at the same time, public safety has the ability to turn that off if they are doing a surveillance that is legally allowed to do via a warrant or maybe a pre-service warrant type service that they're doing.
That's pretty cool. Comment from Michelle, and then I'm gonna shift gears here.
So what you're hitting on is something that we've talked about in legacy aviation for so long. Something as simple as what kind of paint do we use on the airport markings? This is the same thing. It's that visual cue, that visual means of conveying information. What if we made all the public safety drones orange? Why do they all have to be black or white? Then it would be one less level of complexity that our community. Now, mind you, I'm talking about those that we are doing DFR programs, that the drone in a box that gets deployed. I'm not talking about covert operations. I'm not talking about what the detective takes out of his trunk. I'm talking about those very visible operations where they are automatically deployed and they're going to get eyes on, immediately. That's one less concern, one less level of complexity with the community. Why aren't we talking about that?
For sure. All right. Well, I'd like to shift gears into one of the other complexities, which is that noisy, the frequency kind of jammed environment, if you will. New York, or like Times Square, or a large stadium where there's so many cell phones and things being used. Don, before you have to drop, I don't know if you have any time, a minute or two or whatever. I mean, tell me when you need to drop. But do you mind to kind of kick that off with just some anecdotes of like is connectivity an issue or in certain environments? Like, what does that really look like? And
I
then
think,
maybe Rob, if you have some thoughts or questions for Donna on that, spin off
yeah,
that.
Rob, you probably know this a lot better. Of course, there's connectivity, issues, and I always go back to when we first started our DFR program in Chula Vista. We're an urban city and everything, and then Tijuana, which is 8 miles to the south of us, stood up a bunch of radio towers, and it immediately basically grounded our program in the south part of the city because of the connectivity issues. I think that is a huge one that I'm hearing across the country is a lot of agencies want to utilize drone as a first responder because of the value of the ruralness of it, that if they don't have to send a deputy 50 miles to a location, and they can send a drone out there that's pre-staged already. But the challenge is they don't have that connectivity issue, connectivity out there. I think that's where Rob really, and what he's doing at TEAL, is probably more suited to explain, like, what is the roadmap for the industry moving forward on doing that? Is Starlink an option? What are the satellite that we could do for drones?
Yes, yes, and yes. And our view at TEAL is it should be a mix. We work with some defense organizations, and they're doing missions on the edge, and there is no cellular connectivity. They need to rely on RF and mesh and satellite. Satellite for certain things like C2 can be very reliable, but for high data types of things like video, when we talk about DFR and we talk about the types of missions that are being done in cities where there is cellular spectrum, then cellular makes a lot of sense. And so our viewpoint is that you shouldn't just choose one and call it good. You should be able to rely on both RF, for instance, as well as having fallback to cellular or vice versa. On the cellular side, we want to take it another layer deeper and say that you should be able to switch between networks. So you should have the ability to connect onto T-Mobile and switch to AT&T or fall back to Verizon if you need to. And that's really the orchestration layer that we help to provide. But it's a mix. It's, like I was saying before, it's an and, not an or.
Does that help? I mean, would that cut through in Times Square or something, or is it just too noisy in a place like that to get cell reception? Is it the RF that was probably being interrupted, or was it potentially like cell connectivity and kind of the anecdote I shared, or at like a NFL game when all their cell phones are going on? There's like 50,000 cell phones or whatever is there. I've heard law enforcement agencies say it's pretty hard to stay connected to their own drone, and I'm not sure. I don't know why. Like, what would be your guess, Rob, if you just had to kind of give it a stab?
What I can say is that it's going to be on the network operators who have the control over the spectrum to make sure that it's ready and available, especially as more and more drones come online and fill the skies. They need to be able to connect. And so I think that's the pressure that needs to be put on the mobile network operators. Obviously, in emergency situations, you do have dedicated spectrum, like FirstNet as an example, and T-Mobile has their version as well. That can be dedicated for first responders. So,
fair enough. That's good. It's almost right of way, maybe, but for a signal and connectivity.
Let me just add something to that. I think one of the things that's important to understand is, and we're seeing this with some of the drones, is that it's also part of the drone design. There has to be the appropriate shielding for the controls. We're seeing some of that now where radio is too close to a controller can actually interfere or disrupt that communications. But I think to the point of what Rob mentioned is Part 108 is really going to be built on reliability and redundancy in the systems, that you've got something that picks up when the other doesn't work, and that ability to flex between different alternatives is going to make a huge difference in that operation.
I'll just add one more thing to that piece. And this is obviously just having to do with cellular connectivity. But if you're familiar with roaming is not as reliable as connecting directly onto one of the MNOs, one of the network operators. And so our view is that for mission critical types of use cases like DFR, these drones should be connecting directly onto the networks themselves and not utilizing a roaming solution.
So
Interesting. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but Don's going to have to drop here. Don, thank you so much. If you want to say any final words, or if you're literally walking around doing an airplane, I can't hear you. You're muted, but
Yeah, thank you very much. Great discussion. I wish I could stay on longer, but I already hear them boarding my flight. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later.
appreciate it.
Bye,
Take care.
Dan. Yeah.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Let's pull that thread a little bit further. So I am hearing us talk largely when we reference public safety. We're saying the DFR program, but public safety is bigger than the DFR program. And we know that there are these kinds of complexities at large events. It's not necessarily a DFR environment, is it? It's more of a collective security partners event. So being able to have that redundancy, I think, is critical. And I think they're doing that. But we don't want to tie the public safety function only to the DFR program, right? Just so that we're clear that there's a whole lot more that they're doing that is also in very complex environments. Yes, being at a large event like the Super Bowl or something like that, or the World Cup events that are coming, that is going to be super complicated. The spectrum is going to be crazy, and having dedicated spectrum seems like the common sense, logical thing for an event of those size. That should go in your comments, folks.
Mm-hmm.
As you're putting your comments back into this NPRM or any other future rulemaking, 2209 is coming soon about critical infrastructure. Those things in your comments.
And I want to make a clarification too, just so you understand, is that if you want priority and preemption, the only one that can truly do that from a cellular service is FirstNet. They're the only ones that have a dedicated spectrum and a dedicated core, which will give priority and preemption. The others are doing something similar, but not to the level of what FirstNet does. That's a public-private partnership with the federal government and built through AT&T. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can model that, kind of to your point, Charles, about some public-private partnership with these automated data service providers for that piece to know when it's public safety drone in the air versus an Amazon delivery, but not charge the public safety agency the same rate that you might, or bring them on as that public-private partner. But with that, I want to just do another shout out for this event coming up, because everyone here on the call is going to be in Vegas next week. And we would love to have anyone who's listening out there who wants to find one of us, tap us on the shoulder, and deep dive these conversations even more. So I just want to bring this up because this is going to be really fun, and just to shout out about the event in general, the co-located event as well with drone responders. It's going to be there. It's not all shown on here, but I just wanted to highlight this. Also, Don Zoldi, thanks for the comment here just a minute ago. And Autonomy Global shows up on this as well as just a major partner of Don. This is Don's baby. This is the 5th annual. I've heard amazing things about it. But Rob, if you want to speak to it as well, I know that TEAL is helping make that possible and helping provide, a great time for people. But I guess go ahead if you have any comments on this one, again, for those who have just tuned in and maybe didn't hear earlier.
Yeah. Shout out to Don and Autonomy Global for giving TEAL the opportunity to help co-sponsor this alongside Carasoft. We're really looking forward to this event that is on the Monday right before the Commercial UAV Expo and Drone Responders kicks off. So if you're in Vegas on September 1st, 7 p.m., in between Harrah's and the Link, you'll find this event at Carnival Court. And at 8 p.m., a hair band Spandex Nation is going to be going on stage. It should just be a really good time, some fun networking, and drinks will be on the house. So definitely show up, and we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, let me give a shout out to Dawn as well. She knows how to throw a party, and she's also one of our board of advisors, as is Michelle. So way to go, Dawn.
There we go. Come on. And then I'll just highlight this one more time. This Week in Drones. And I will be carrying a couple of these around with me at the conference, and there will be a secret way to get a hold of one of them if you want one, but you got to come ask me about it. So with that said, I wanted to go back to something Don had said. I know he had to jump on a flight, didn't want to make him late, but if there were EV tolls and he could just skip the flight and, go on one of those, maybe that would have been better, but in the future. With that, he mentioned something, of course, close to what I do with my day job over at Echodyne with the radar portion of ground-based detect and avoid and getting that coverage. I'm hearing a lot of interesting things, in the market related to that, even with, well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I actually wanted to springboard back to Michelle and some of what you're seeing regarding, Don's comment about this, something like radar covered infrastructure, whether it's radars, whether it's any of this stuff, to support drone flights, over cities and wherever. Like, what are you seeing in terms of, is it all coming from law enforcement? Are they funding all this? Is it a mix? Is it a relationship between multiple stakeholders in a city? Like, I'd love to just kind of peel that open a little bit. So I think it's very strategic, right, to think about.
I agree with you 100%. And that is one of the things that it bothers me about how we are collectively going about this. It's very stovepiped, and people in each stovepipe tend to take the weight of the world on themselves, and they assume that they have to do all the things and they have to fund all of the infrastructure. And that's just not the case. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to meet the states where they are in whatever their level of advanced air mobility or drone integration discussions are, and try and help open those apertures and to make sure that there is a public safety line item in those discussions, because the infrastructure that is being created by whether it's advanced air mobility or drone integration or urban planning
or counter drone too, because actually quite a bit of technology is going out for that, but it's going to, there's only so much room in the frequency and the spectrum for all these devices to go out there, right? So
that's right. And what we're also forgetting about is there is a myriad of other agencies out there who are very interested in the value of whether it's it's detection, traction, and identification, right? And that serves so many different missions across the government, across state level initiatives, that we really do have an opportunity for shared infrastructure cost sharing. So it's not just one, it's multiple streams that could be contributing to the collective state environment and ecosystem. So that's kind of what I'm doing, is I'm trying to talk with them to create that, I'm calling it a sandbox, and create that sandbox and bring in all of those different components and make sure that as we are bringing in the things that serve public safety, we are targeting those things, we're tagging them, we make it very clear that there is a public safety use case here. And then we start pushing on those use cases to show the nuances for the public safety community, how they use that infrastructure and how they use that data and when they use it and what they need in order for it to be meaningful and actionable intelligence for them. Sometimes is different than what the rest of the stakeholder community is considering. That's really important messaging. So I'm hoping we can do some of that this coming year.
Absolutely. A quick anecdote. I was on a call yesterday, in fact, with an agency that was actually, it wasn't law enforcement. This was a hospital to hospital delivery of blood, right? And it was like to be able to zip over in like 4 minutes, do some sort of analysis at another location 4 minutes back. So it was a total turnaround of like 20, 30, 40 minutes max, instead of like 4 hours plus, so it saved, a tremendous amount of time. And we're talking about radar coverage because there's a GA airport right there, kind of in the crosshairs right between these two hospitals. And as the conversation went, we realized, well, the GA airport itself has some interest. And if we were to mount radars at that location and get coverage of the hospitals from there, it actually gave the hospitals better coverage. It covered more blind spots and stuff behind them. And then it also gave all this economic value to the other party. And it was funny because on the conversation, as soon as we just like mused about, just like, I wonder if we could put them over here. Then suddenly they said that if we did that, that introduces two other major stakeholders with funding that have a reason for this that I could call today to help enable this infrastructure that I need, and that would benefit them. It's just the thought that wasn't even part of the conversation when we started, but they have good relationship with that airport. And so it was like, it made so much sense. It was pretty interesting.
There's nothing nefarious. There's nothing exclusive. It's that these folks just haven't thought that way before. So it's up to us collectively to introduce that into any of those conversations and bring them back to the table.
For sure. And you see why, with what we just said, why it's important that we putting these comments regarding, the legislation that's pending right now. And then, like making sure that law enforcement is really noted and given what they need as these policies are put into place, right? Because when you look at a whole city and we start to deploy like this, you don't want agencies operating under 4 different,
Right.
one under Part 91, one under Part 108, one under Part 107, and having this too much of a clash, right, across that whole city.
That might happen. We do that in the airspace all the time. We've got 91, 135, 121. We've got 121 supplementals, 121 domestic. I mean, we do that every day. We know how to do that. What we don't know how to do is to have seamless services within a new entrant environment where we have to have different service providers, where we have to have different prioritizations. And it's really hard for us to be able to visually tell the difference between them.
We also have some issues with the FCC giving or dedicating spectrum to UAS as well. And the problem with that is it goes back to really being focused on the commercial side again, and to where they want to know how you sign on, what time period you need it from, from this point to that point. And it's back to that commercial side that doesn't fit public safety. And it's sometimes difficult to stay on top of those kind of rulemaking things because they get so technical that we miss the point. So we're still trying to have conversations with that to make sure that public safety doesn't get excluded from that commercial application of these time frames that we don't operate under.
Interesting. Yeah, I had an anecdote. I don't know if I shared this on a previous episode, but was at an event not too long ago on a rooftop. It was really hot, and somebody there actually passed out. It was just part of like a work event, probably similar to what we're going to be doing in Vegas. Just hanging out and networking and having a good time out there. But then this person passed out. It was pretty traumatic, and I was imagining what it would have been like if a drone had shown up, painted red, white, and blue or whatever, red and blue. And they were able to give cover. What if it showed up in like 2 minutes or something, or even 1 minute, if it was like, boom, it was there, they're announcing things over it. Hey, we got a ambulance on the way. They could actually visually see. They had people like on their phone, videoing, showing, what was going on. And I was like, wow, a drone could easily just hover and zoom in and see and go. And then they could say, hey, no, pick up her head or don't pick up her head, leave it there, put some ice, whatever, water, and have coached that. That would have brought such a level of comfort, I think. I mean, it might take a little bit of public acceptance, more time for people to, that might have kind of escalated things and drawn attention unnecessarily. And who knows, there's probably a lot of factors there, but I was in a moment maybe 2 weeks ago where I was just like, man, the drone's not there. And I think it could bring a ton of value and a ton of comfort there.
We do have those services that are available now. We've got companies like Jamar at Promo Drone. They would do that very thing. A big LED screen that's on a drone, and they can put out public safety messages, public service messages in an instant. They came to our AVSI exponential a couple of years ago and put on a display for us, and it is exactly what you're talking about. What the problem being is that we haven't broadened our own apertures in order to be inclusive in the concepts that we're developing for these use cases. But the technology's there.
Well, interesting. And actually, I think I just accidentally moved us into one of our final topics, which is building the public trust, the community. Sorry, and I didn't mean to kind of cut off your thought process there, but my mind just jumped to the fact that I did want to address that complexity as well, and that leads us right to that, which is, what if a drone did show up there? Would it have caused maybe some chaos, or would it have caused more people to notice what was going on in a negative sense and cause them to surround and maybe cause commotion and distress? Maybe that would have heightened stress in the environment, or what? And what does that look like? And I know that was something that Michelle, that you had kind of brought up as like hey, we can't forget about this too. We can't just talk technology and connectivity and data service providers, automated data service providers. We got to talk about building community trust around public safety drones. But just want to see if you had any thoughts to springboard off that, and maybe Rob, if you have any thoughts too, like on the back of that. But,
well, I think that also, Charles, you and I both heard this loud and clear at the Leadership Summit, that education is key, that if you don't start and I think, Charles, you may be the one who said it, if you don't start your community engagement program first before you start deploying your public safety drones, you are on a path to failure, because all that's going to do is cause confusion and delay the successes and the benefits that you will ultimately be able to gain through your drone program. So it's imperative that you get out there and start planting those seeds and introducing the topic and sharing with them how it's going to work, what it does do and what it doesn't do, to help ease that entryway into the community. Charles, I know I just repeated words that you said earlier this week. Why don't you go ahead and say it better?
No, I think we've learned from experience that you must get community engagement and trust first, because if you don't, it comes as though you're trying to hide something. You're trying to do something under the veil of secrecy, and that then gives you into the concept of then automatically thinking you're going to be doing random surveillance and you're going to be spying on me. And so you put it out there and you share what you're doing, what you're not doing. We've taken from Fairfax's example. Fairfax County started their program. They didn't go through and do the community engagement. They got stopped. They had to start over again and go back from the very beginning and do town hall meetings. So we took from that and said, give me your procedures that you did for doing this town hall meetings, going to the schools, doing demonstrations with kids, their parents, the teachers, engage that so they could see what it is, but very importantly, what it is not. And that includes your appointed and elected officials. They all have got to be on the same page and understand it so they can answer the questions that come from the public. So we have that in our community outreach folder in our resource center, which is free. And we just took what Fairfax did and said, here's a template they used. You can customize it any way you like.
We hear that from all of the public safety leaders too. I mean, we hear DJ, we hear Jason, we hear Rob. They're all very clear that the value of community engagement can't be overstated. So those of you that are out there that are even thinking about standing up even a drone in the trunk kind of drone use, you still have to do that community engagement right up front, because you think your life is complicated now. It's going to get a whole lot worse once the community starts a bandwagon of the fear mongering that Charles was just alluding to. That's a level of complexity nobody wants.
Well, you look back to what happened with the whole New Jersey frenzy not too long ago, and that's really case in point, right? I mean, for all we know, that could have been whatever. I don't want to label what it was, but at the same time, probably someone was flying a drone for some reason. I'll just go there. And someone else saw it and didn't know what that reason was. And it sparked this entire frenzy, essentially. And so, you know, of course, there was many things that were mislabeled, that were not drones, that were helicopters, things like that. But that all kind of came in the escalation phase. But I think there was a drone or two, you know, flying about, and people didn't know what it was for, you know, and that was really what that exposed, was just simply like, if we don't have these systems to say very quickly, no, you know what, we went back and we looked, and that was a drone for, you know, inspections for this utility, that was a law enforcement drone, that was a military drone, whatever, and they were there, they were supposed to be there, they followed the rules, don't worry everyone, we're safe, there's no mothership off the coast or whatever. But then that would give comfort knowing if in the real world, if there was a mothership, etc., we would actually be able to determine that too. Like, anyways, I think that exposed a lot. I don't know, Rob, you're going to say, Charles, everybody came off mute, so I don't know. Rob, go for it.
I wasn't sure if Charles was next. I was just going to say that, you know, I 100% agree with what Michelle and Charles are saying. As from a civilian perspective, in an emergency, if every second counts and drones have the ability to save lives, then that's a really strong message that you can get out and get ahead of and put people's minds at ease that you're not there to surveil them. This isn't a big brother type of initiative. This is there to provide more safety. I mean, you even look at Brink and their founder's story and why they came to be. It was all about public safety and providing faster response times, and it still is today. And I think that's very powerful, and maybe I'm biased, but I'm all for this type of technology in, you know, making response times faster. providing more situational awareness and saving lives at the end of the day.
Absolutely, big time. Charles, I don't know if you were going to say anything off of that, or if you had any further thoughts. I know we're wrapping up here. We just have a minute or two left, a couple minutes here, but that's I will say, Rob, if anyone is looking for that connectivity, the ability to switch between different providers, T-Mobile, Verizon, etc., and have that solidified for their program, their drones or their other technology, definitely go check out TEAL.io. Because I think you guys are doing some really cool stuff. And then also meet Rob in person. We're all going to be hanging out there in Vegas. And I love it when people walk up and say, hey, I saw you on a podcast last week. Wanted to come introduce myself and spark some sort of meaningful conversation. It happens all the time now. And so I hope that it happens for each of us, for next week, and all of you out there, vice versa. I feel like we're all a big growing family. And, we always love those conversations. Charles, you look like you have something on your mind. Do you? No? Just want to make sure.
I think we just have a whole lot of opportunities. And I think that one of the things that was missed in Part 108 that I think is still of concern to me is the conspicuity in the airspace. I think there was still some things that we could have done to elevate that of some of the other aircraft that are flying in that space that may not be on an automated data service provider and some other stuff, which is going to cleave a little bit of a gap in there that we're going to have to figure out. But I think the future is bright. I think it's great that we have an advantage now of looking forward, of saying we're going to get the technology finally to start flying. I'm transitioning my basketball court that was in my backyard that was for my kids, that they're no longer doing that anymore, to put a big A on it. So Amazon knows they can actually do their delivery onto my pad, and I'm good for that same day service. And I from public safety perspective, we've already seen drones are saving lives, but we've also seen that we're having some growing pains. We've got issues of DFR programs overlapping each other, and we're seeing that. We're seeing now where aviation assets need to fly in for wildfires. We got DFR programs, and so we got to get that communication. So I think Michelle brought up about TAC earlier. I think the TAC has an opportunity for us to coordinate some of those things. So it's going to be this growth pattern, and Drone Responders is working on setting up a TAC server with our partners. Zeb Nadler is going to help us, and AJ from out in California, to have a sandbox that people can come in and start playing with that some to figure out how that works. So a lot of exciting things ahead.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another session on that. Get Zeb back on the panel. Love that guy. But all right. Well, look, in the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Michelle, do you have any final comments or thoughts? And then Rob, I'll let you land the plane, and then we'll see you guys in Vegas after that.
So I think that my original position coming into this podcast remains the same. There is a voice for public safety that needs to be fleshed out and articulated on a number of fronts. So my mission is to help amplify that voice and to be clear that there are nuances that make the public safety mission different than DoD or national security or commercial operations. And it's up to the public safety community to identify those nuances so that they can be so that those decision makers have a chance to put that stuff in there. I mean, right now they're doing the best they can, but they don't know what they don't know. But you guys know. So it's up to the community to give that voice the content and the meat that it needs. Over.
And contact Charles. What was your email again, Charles? Charles@DRONERESPONDERS.org. Okay, yay. I'm glad I said it right, because that was a risk. But send him a note, and we can add and accumulate those thoughts together as in terms of the public safety perspective and comments on these, on this NPRM. Rob, why don't you take us home? Just some of your thoughts, final words for the group before we see you there in person next week.
Yep. So thank you again for plugging the event on September 1st at 7 p.m. Carnival Court. We will hope to see you there. If you're interested in learning more about how TEAL can help you and your drone operations, definitely meet us at the Commercial UAV Expo. We make it super simple to connect your drones onto any public or private, we didn't talk about private networks, and to switch between them dynamically over the air. Because as we talked about today, it's all about failover, it's all about redundancy, and cellular is not a silver bullet, but it's one of the many options that are available to keep drones connected and, at the end of the day, safe, and to provide that situational awareness that first responders need.
Come on. Awesome. Well, until next time, everybody, I'm your host, David Lewin, and this has been another live session of This Week in Drones. Don't forget to come find me at Commercial UAV and ask about getting hold of one of these. I'll send you more on that, but I'm kind of excited about it. We'll talk to you guys soon.